Go get some.
Yeah, that's if you want to, I guess.
Do what? Go get something to drink. right, Casey. It's time to do this. All right. Help online. All right, Brendan, give me a thumbs up. All right, Casey,
Yes.
welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show.
Very special edition of the Meltdown Show.
A very special edition.
We have a very special setting tonight.
Very appropriate setting.
We do. Uh, but you know what? Before we get to the topic at hand, oh, you're going full on like clip on mic. All right.
Yeah, I think they need to be able to hear us. I don't know. Seems like a good idea.
We'll see. We will track
Brennan,
the
you let us know
audio.
if you can hear Brian okay.
I think he probably can.
Yeah.
We'll find out
Oh,
shortly.
we're up to 7 viewers, which is
Well,
really only 5.
thank you all 2 to 3 of you that are
Yeah.
actually dialed in. So
3 viewers and 4 Russian bots.
yeah, this is always an awkward beginning because there's a hell of a lot going on here to actually get this thing rolling. Um, but before we get to the task at hand,
You are low, by the
I'm
way. Here
low.
are we.
All
Just
right.
wear the microphone. That's what
Just
it's made
whatever.
for.
God, there's probably gonna be a lot of cussing tonight, especially as the evening goes on.
Tell you
All right.
what a beautiful evening, says Tyler Eubanks. Thanks for tuning in, Tyler.
Appreciate you, buddy. But let's start this show off because I think we need to recognize Fire Buzz for winning his second big road game of the week.
Uh huh.
All right, so A&M took down SMU tonight over in Dallas. Not the easiest of wins, but it's a road win in a hostile environment. And
We're gonna have lots of cool sounds tonight. Uh, yeah, a road win in a hostile environment, and what?
second of the week.
Second of the week. Thank you, Buzz, or whoever does these things, of getting some real uh, P5 competition. Is SMU? Would you consider them? Well, it's all about quads, right?
It is.
And whatever. Regardless, a real non-conference schedule, which apparently matters a great deal. And more than that, not just putting on the schedule, but going and winning in really great fashion, in the way that you would hope a top 25 basketball team does. So, look, whatever. The season's off to a nice start. I have high hopes for the season, I guess, but I don't know. I don't know what else we can say right now at the moment about Aggie basketball.
Well, I'll tell you what we could say, Casey.
Okay.
We could say that we're very thankful that Fire Buzz is still around. That Fire Buzz is still a thing for Aggie basketball because if you back up about a year and a half,
Mm-hmm.
A&M in February of 2022 had
Mm-hmm.
lost 7 straight SEC games. And our fan base was absolutely livid and far past the point of no return. They were ready to cut Buzz loose. They wanted him gone. And, all of a sudden on a mid-February night, a 1-point win at home over Florida rescued Buzz Williams from the fan base, from the athletic director, from all of the BMAs. And today, we have what looks like is going to be a top 10 basketball program, maybe by early next week. We'll see. So, I don't know why I'm pointing that out. I have there's really no point to it.
Well,
I think that the Orange Bowl I'm sorry, the NIT run that we went on at the end of that year was really nice. So I'm just glad he's here. That's all I'm gonna say. So cheers to Buzz
Cheers
and
to
where he has
Buzz.
Aggie basketball.
Sure.
Love you, Buzz.
Yeah. Okay. I point taken.
I don't know what you're talking
I
about.
what year are we in of Buzz? It doesn't really matter.
We're in year 5.
We're in year 5. Okay.
We are in year 5
Let me say real
with
quick.
two healthy starting point guards.
Oh, that's interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah. Let me say real quick to Tyler in the comments. Go ahead and fire off that short list now. We'll be happy to take a look at it when it comes to that point in the show. I don't think the comments are going to get so crowded that we have to worry about it getting
I think that's
lost.
probably true.
Yeah. So we'd love to see it. Also, I don't know. Everybody if you're in the comments or just watching, let us know where you're at. And who knows? I don't know. Maybe your class year or something like that. So we
Yeah,
have an idea
identify
of
yourself.
what what your perspective is and whether or not we're going to take it seriously.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, back to the task at hand. So, Saturday night, A&M put on quite a show at Kyle Field with the third string quarterback beating Mississippi State 51 to 10. Um, but in retrospect, as we watched Jimbo Fisher walk off the field, it's obvious something wasn't right.
Yeah, that was not the walk of a guy that just whipped somebody by 41 points.
That's correct. It really wasn't, was it?
Yeah.
And early Sunday morning, we found out why. And that's because as the national media uh, started to pick up on the rumors, Billy Lucci then broke the news that Jimbo Fisher was going to be let go. Which, hey, Jimbo Fisher getting fired, did that surprise you? Just Jimbo Fisher being fired.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
big time. Well, I, on Sunday morning, did it surprise me?
correct.
Okay, yes, yeah, big time.
It
Yeah,
did surprise you. Okay, so the timing was certainly quite a shock.
yeah,
Um, but that's okay. I think we sort of felt that it was trending in this direction.
Sure.
Anybody that was listening over the last week and really since the Ole Miss loss
right,
on a fingernail at the buzzer, it wasn't trending in the right direction. But
right.
certainly didn't expect it to come on Sunday morning.
No, I didn't, but there's been a lot of talk about this week, and heck, it even came up at big company lunch today with as kind of some more casual fans, I guess, overheard us talking, and it was like, wait, well, did we lose? They were like, oh, Jimbo got fired. Did y'all lose? Heck, even excuse me, I don't know what's going on there. Even my wife, who watched the game, or at least pretended to with one eye, I don't know, watched the game as we were beating the tar out of Mississippi State. Then the next morning, when I said, "Holy shit, Jimbo just got fired," her first question was, "Wait, did we lose?" I and I understand people's confusion, and we'll get into how we feel about the firing in general, I guess. Although I think if you watch this channel, you should probably already be able to figure that out. Look, if you've decided that he's not the guy and you're going to fire him, I really have no issue with the timing. Like, if the decision's been made, then what's the point? What are you looking for in the next couple of weeks? What good is it going to do you? And I think that's what, you know, whoever made this decision was thinking. And not only that, I think you said, and I think you're right, leaking it when it did leak was probably intentional and a direct response to the whipping that we put on Mississippi State the night before, because the last thing you want, if you've made the decision, he's got to go, there's no turning back now, we're going to do it. The last thing you need is for any kind of momentum to gather at the end of the season. And if you watch that game and saw how excited everyone was about Jalen Henderson.
103,000 people.
103,000 people there. You did not want them to get excited about the prospect of Jimbo Fisher being here one more day.
One more day,
Yeah,
much less potentially three more games,
right.
right? You went out, all of a sudden you're sitting at 8-4 on the season. You're going to a bowl game. You couldn't risk that. The decision had already been made. Because look, we've seen this happen before with Les Miles,
Hmm.
ironically with Jimbo Fisher on the other line, and beats A&M. And you know, at some point in that game, the big money donors for LSU cornering the athletic director in the suite, basically saying you can't let this guy go, and it secured an extra year for Les Miles.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, I think in previous shows we said that was Edo because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we were hazy on that because it was all a lifetime
Well,
ago. But yeah, it was Les
probably some
Miles.
serious scotch involved on that night. So
Probably.
could have been, right? So
Right.
listen, that's where the timing came from. But the next surprise for us after the timing of it all was that evidently we had no plan. There was no plan after firing Jimbo Fisher. And I don't think people are nearly livid enough about that fact.
No, they're not. In fact, well, I think most people are actually in denial about that fact. If you watch the comments on TexAgs, on our Twitter feed, or whatever, they're in complete denial.
Yes, 100%.
Like it should be completely clear. Well, I think we should be clear about what we mean by a plan, and that's not just a guy in place, because that's if we're gonna have a search or whatever, or we've got a short list, that's fine. That's not a plan to me because you can just throw however many dudes you want on a short list. That's fine. Nobody seems to appreciate how difficult it is going to be to replace Jimbo Fisher, and what we actually need in place. Like what should if you're so dissatisfied with Jimbo Fisher's tenure, and it's got to be better, right? You fired him
Yep.
because it's not good enough. So it's got to be better. And we're hungry for a title. I've seen nothing to suggest that anybody has any idea what's needed for that and is going to go about this process with the intention of getting that.
Yes. And
I,
and I think it starts with what you just said. What's the mission? What's the actual goal?
right.
Right? Because I've seen everything from, well, we just need to get somebody in here who can develop players, somebody who can handle the press conference. Very happy to go out and throw out all different kinds of candidates. But if the goal remains the same, which is win a national title, not just a conference championship, but win a national title, you are 100% correct. The process, as it's being laid out in front of us, is woefully inadequate to do that. Unless something comes out of left field that we have not seen or heard, what's in front of us is not going to get this done. And people should be freaking pissed off about that. Not because we fired Jimbo Fisher. Not That's not the only reason. But if you're going to light $77 million on fire and pay that guy that much money to just go away because he hasn't gotten you to the mountaintop, well, then surely we are prepared to go out and do whatever it takes to get to that mountaintop. And and it seems that we don't really understand what that is as a fan base. Okay. And we're okay with not being willing to go out and do whatever it takes. We've seen it all over
All
message boards,
over. It's
Twitter,
90% of the posts we see talking
on
about
the
this
radio,
on the radio.
local radio and national,
Yeah. It's
right?
just, well, look, he wasn't the guy. If you're sure he's not the guy, you just got to move on. And whatever comes after is just
Well,
Well,
it's just the fallout from moving on.
right,
So, man, again, that's why we're sitting on the back porch just trying to drink
right.
some scotch and enjoy a beautiful evening. Because frankly, it's all gone to hell in a handbasket.
Well, and look, I God, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, I think
That's why it's Tuesday night and we're
right,
just now doing this.
right, for sure. I think sorry, I'm just reading some of the comments. I and now I've lost my train of thought. That was pretty tenuous to begin with, but I I think people hear us talk like that on Twitter, whatever, and immediate they have this emotional reaction that's
Hmm.
just well, I, I don't know. It's like eggs are talking past each other constantly about it, right? Like nobody wants to hear about recruiting anymore, right? If you bring that up and you say we need to have a plan for that, it's just well, I mean, we've seen that before, right? So we've just got to develop. If you're upset about the firing at all or skeptical of it, it's
You're a
I don't
Jimbo apologist
right. Yeah.
and you're okay with mediocrity.
Right.
Yeah. Well, guess what? We're not. We're not okay with mediocrity. But
No.
our alarm bells right now is because we can 100% see mediocrity ahead of us if we get this wrong. And by the
Yeah.
way, there's a 95% chance we're going to get this wrong.
Oh, yeah. I think that's really what's got us just dumbfounded at what's going on
Yeah.
because everybody's plan or thought process seems to be driven towards getting it wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like and almost and then a surprising number of you really just kind of satisfied with getting it wrong. You're like, well, if it doesn't work, we'll fire them in a few years and we'll just keep trying. And okay, trying what specifically? Trying what? I, I, that seems to be the real disconnect, right? Is that there's just, I,
Well, my favorite argument is, well, you tried the big name coach
right,
with the national championship pedigree and the guy who could recruit lights out, and it didn't work. So why not just go get somebody and pay them less that's an up and comer and take the risk? Well, guess what? 99.9% of the time, that doesn't work. And I'm
right,
not making up a number, okay? That that's just simple math, right? And the whole idea of going out and throwing it on the table and playing in the big leagues and hiring somebody like Jimbo Fisher was that you were trying to get from a 99.9% chance of failure to something like 1 in 3.
yeah, right. Well, but it did fail, right?
It did.
So what does it matter?
Yeah. I guess what does it matter?
Or
Well,
it did fail. We're certain it failed, right? Everyone's
so
certain that it failed and was, yeah,
well, so I understand our athletic director and our big money ags. Maybe they don't want to take another swing as big as the one that they took. Maybe it's just not possible. Maybe we don't have all the money in the world that everybody seems to think we do. That could be true. All right. How about we take a 1 in 5 swing or a 1 in 10 swing? But right now, based on, again, everything we're hearing, what do you think the likelihood is, Casey, that we get another Power Five head coach to come to Aggieland? What do you
a,
think the odds of that
a
are?
sitting Power Five
A
head
sitting
coach.
Power Five head coach.
Oh, like 1%.
I think that's dead on.
Yeah. And maybe you think we don't need that. I I can be talked into that. In fact, of most of the names I'm seeing floated as possibilities, probably the one I'm most interested in is not a sitting Power Five head
Mhm.
coach. But yeah, there just seems to be some real weapons grade delusion about what the risks are with the hires that are being talked about. And not just that, not just the risk, but but how bad the program could actually get with the wrong hire. That's the one that's really killing
Hmm.
me. It's
Right.
just, well, lots of guys could come in and win with this talent. Like it's just sitting here teed up for them, like for whoever comes in, like a little fairy delivered it to campus, and we just got to get the right guy to coach it up.
Right.
I
Never taking into account that the wrong hire, a mediocre hire, most of the candidates on the list we've seen that are realistic, there's a high likelihood that that coach doesn't come in and have access to two-thirds of that talent. Why is that?
it might be because you fired the guy that brought him in here,
And they could leave,
and they can leave
and they have really good options
really good ones.
because we have long maintained, all right, that and to be fair, we've done this in conversations with ourselves for the most part,
Right.
okay, over the last several weeks.
Mm-hmm.
This is the worst possible time, the worst possible timing to go do something like what appears we are going to go do. And there's a couple of reasons for that. All right, I can actually name six. I can name six reasons. All right, it's Texas, it's OU, it's UCLA, it's Washington, it's USC, and
Oregon.
Oregon. Those six names right there. All right, six reasons, not even the only reasons, but I can name those six. All six of those teams are going to move conferences. Four of them are going to the Big Ten. Texas and OU, right here in our backyard, are taking a major step up and going to the SEC. Our roster is ripe for the pickings. Our roster is completely loaded with talent. And those guys, all of those teams, and all of the other traditional powers in
Right.
college football are going to be feasting on this roster if we get this. I don't even know if wrong is, if we don't knock this out of the park.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, I'm not sure we even know what that looks like knocking it out of the park looks like. I think I we have our ideas about who could come in and keep this cupboard from getting raided. You know, I I don't know if we know any more than anybody else, right? I don't know what that formula is, but 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 for sure the wrong hire blows this up completely, like completely. And we're like, oh well, but we can do the transfer portal too. Okay, I I, I
Yeah, the idea of cleaning up on other people's leftovers in the transfer
right,
portal at the worst possible time from a
yeah,
competitive standpoint sounds really good. Sounds like
yeah,
a great, and that's what we mean by you have no idea how bad this can actually get,
right.
right? So,
Well, and people have no idea what the floor for the program actually is in this division of football.
right. I don't know what you mean by this division in football.
Well, yeah, well, I don't know either anymore, but or at least not in 2024, but yeah. I mean, come on. Like there is the feeling out there that like 5 to 4 or 5 losses is like the worst a coach could possibly do. And
Boy, let me
man, I
tell
got
you.
news for you. God, I just I don't know who is partly why I asked for like class years and stuff because I'm like, is it just because they haven't been watching long enough? I don't know because it's not even Aggie football. I mean, it's just all of football, right? Like, do you not watch? Do you not see what goes
Understand
on? I
how
don't
bad
know.
it could be?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and I guess it's probably not fair because I think we've made a lot of assumptions here for folks watching now or who may watch this later on. What do we mean by what's possible? So, here's here's what we do know. Okay, and listen, when I say we know, we are taking the athletic director's word for it. We're definitely taking Billy Lucci's word for it, as
Hmm.
we've learned to do over the years, and to trust what the guy is saying about the program. And here's what we're here. Here's what they're saying. Nobody came along and just wrote a big giant check for the 77 million. All right. There's a certain portion of this, I think $19 million being covered by the 12th Man Foundation. The other 50, depending on what the clauses are in the contract, you're probably looking at least $50 million over the next 8 years coming out of the 12th man, I'm sorry, the athletic department's budget. Okay. And I've heard people say, and even Ross Bjork said, well, we're going to grow revenues. Great. Everybody's growing revenues. Okay. They still don't have this massive expense on their books like we're going to have for the next 8 years. Okay. So one way or another, that's coming out of somebody's program. Okay. Maybe it's going to be spread across everything. It's still a huge hit. Nobody should be under any sort of pretense that it doesn't hurt. It hurts. And here's how we know it hurts, because every possible reliable source is saying A&M is not going to go spend the 8, 9, $10 million to go get a top flight head coach. They're not going to do it this time around. Okay. Which is hilarious because immediately across the national spectrum, Lanning, Kiffin,
DeBoer,
DeBoer,
Mike Norvell.
Mike Norvell at Florida State, Deion Sanders,
Yeah.
all of these sitting Power Five head coaches. Lane Kiffin makes $8.5 million a year. What do you think it costs to get him out of Ole Miss? It costs more than $8.5 million a year. He's not taking a pay cut to come here. He's not. None of these guys. Because guess what? There's also another interested party on the other side of that that's going to do everything they can to keep them. What does Dan Lanning make? What do we decide he makes out at Oregon?
I think it's only like 6 or 7
I think
or
it's 7 million.
something.
It was six
Yeah.
years for 42 with a
Yeah.
$20 million buyout, by the way.
Which, to your point, is already more than the number Billy Lucci has floated as what we are willing to spend. That's
Did
already
everybody
more.
hear that? Because it would get rid of 80% of the dumb shit that we hear on Twitter all day, every day. And the response is typically, oh, if we find the right guy, somebody will
Yeah,
come along and write that check. Maybe
maybe.
that would be great. But that's going to be a really big check, much bigger than anybody thinks.
Yeah.
And so the likelihood of that happening is pretty small.
It's small because you need more than one guy
Yeah.
to write that check. And so whoever it is has to be so impressive to the people writing the checks, not to us or to the national media or so that it's splashy to recruits. It has to be such a splash to the people who write the checks that they all get together in a room and say, "Oh my God, yeah, we have to do this." And that's why I mean 1%, right? Like it's just like we've been warned. Like the people that know this stuff have been trying to tell us since it first went down, that's not going to happen, and people are just like they just aren't hearing it.
In fact, they've been telling us a couple of weeks before
That's
it went
true.
down.
Yeah.
For anybody that would actually listen,
Yeah.
if you start to read the tea leaves, and you can always read the tea leaves. And I'll give you a perfect example. All right. A solid year before we peeled Jimbo Fisher out of Tallahassee, Billy Lucci was dropping hints all over the place that that was the plan, that that is where this was headed. And, you know, it took that long. It took planning 12 months in advance to get that guy out of that program. All right. And it also took about 3 years worth of a souring relationship and 10 years and $90 million. Okay.
Uh,
That's,
75 at the time.
oh, thank you. You're
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
That's what it took at the time. And people think we're waving a magic wand and we can do it again. And that is not going to happen. So I guess it's a good time to pivot to, well, then who are the guys on this list? And maybe what do we think about those guys? So, Casey, 3 or 4 guys that you've heard that you think are actually realistic options at this point.
Right. Like we can afford them.
We can afford them. We might be able to get them. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
And that you believe are legitimately like on a list or in the realm of possibilities. It's likely they're going to get
or that
considered.
we're interested. I mean, let me. I guess before I get to that, I want to answer a question that was in the chat because it kind of goes along with this. Just can I get y'all's thoughts on the article about Gary Patterson saying he's ready to coach again? So my thoughts are, good for Gary. I don't think we're interested, and we on the show are not interested. I think that's fair. Yeah.
I think that's absolutely fair.
Okay. So, what names are probably actually in consideration? Mike Elko. I think. I think the people in charge would be interested. I think he's. I don't actually know what he makes at Duke, but
It's not a lot of money. It's probably about 3.5 million a
yeah.
year.
So
Last
okay,
I looked.
affordable if they don't try to keep him. And okay, you got Mike Elko. You've got Jeff Traylor at UTSA. You've got Glenn Schumann at
Georgia,
Georgia.
defensive coordinator, co-defensive coordinator.
Yep. You've got
The guy at
in Kansas,
Leopold.
The guy at Kansas State. I don't
The
know.
guy at Kansas
The
State.
guy at Kansas State. Just whatever. And I think I keep saying this. There's a guy whose name I'm surprised isn't coming up more often. That's Brian Hartline at Ohio State. I I don't know how much mutual interest there would actually be, but given how many media guys are putting out lists that are basically just throwing crap against the wall, I'm surprised he's not on more of those lists, and I'm surprised more Aggies aren't interested in him just because he's a hot coordinator name at a big program.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think that's kind of it.
So I think the 2 names you mentioned are the ones that for folks who are sort of coming back down to earth, like they are starting to pick up on some of these facts, right? And the things that are being said by people who know. Mike Elko and um, Trailer
Trailer.
are the 2 names that seem to be picking up steam
With fans.
with fans.
You think-
Although I do believe that I have heard Billy mention both of those as possibilities. Mike Elko, in particular, in fact, he said he hopes that Mike Elko was under consideration.
I'm sorry, what now? I missed
Yeah.
that.
Billy believes that Mike Elko will be on that list and that he should be under consideration.
Okay.
So let's talk about Mike. Let's talk about Mike Elko, who did a phenomenal job here as a defensive coordinator. Not always beloved, by the way, while he was here. Okay.
Yeah.
Had a rough patch, just like year 1 DJ Durkin had a rough patch. Okay. People seem to kind of forget this. But Mike did a good job. Mike was a second half wizard as a defensive coordinator. Became renowned for his halftime adjustments. Was here for quite a while. Spent a lot of time at Notre Dame, then at A&M, interviewed for a decent amount of head coaching jobs, some much bigger schools than
Then he
Duke.
ended up at, yeah.
Yeah. And ended up at Duke. Um, felt like, be careful how I say this, because I don't want to say Mike settled for Duke, but when it comes down to is Mike Elko going to make a good head coach at A&M? Here's the feeling that I have, and I'm interested in your views on this. I think Mike Elko is in a really good situation for Mike Elko. I think Mike is in a place where he doesn't have to be the voice of the university from an athletic standpoint. He's not a guy who seeks the limelight, who gravitates towards that. He gets to live in the shadow of a national powerhouse basketball program and gets to do his thing in football without attracting a ton of attention and a lot of pressure. Mike is not, nor has he ever been known as a relentless recruiter, ever.
Ever.
Okay. At A&M, he rarely left campus to do any sort of recruiting. He wanted to run the defense, and he got to do that here. And, well, then why go be a head coach? Well, that's your career progression, but I think he found a place he was comfortable at, and they were comfortable with him. I don't think that's Texas A&M for Mike Elko. I don't think that's a good fit. I think all the things that I just said, they don't apply here.
Yeah. I don't think either one of us gets what we want out of that. I don't think Mike gets what he wants, and definitely A&M doesn't get what they want.
Yeah. And so, when I hear somebody say, well, I hope he's under serious consideration, people that, you respect in this situation, we don't get it. And we've never gotten it. And, the biggest criticisms around here of our defense over the last 2 years is it, wasn't aggressive enough, too many three-man fronts. I
Hallmarks of an Elko defense.
Hallmarks. I beg you to go watch how they lost games this year and what they did on defense at the end of those games, and how um, Mike did the same thing at Duke or at A&M that he's now doing at Duke. And you're not going to be happy with it if all of your criticisms about being aggressive, are true.
Yeah. Whether or not your criticisms are valid or not,
Different discussion.
different podcast.
Yep.
But yeah. No, I think that's true. You want to go trailer. I don't know if that dovetails into what we want in our next coach or not, but I'll be honest, I don't even know that much about Jeff Traylor. I've learned most of it this week.
Right.
I've known that he's been making noise down at UT San Antonio, and that we're supposed to regard that as a miracle, which I find kind of hilarious. But and I
He's
know that he's
7
been
and
around
3
Texas.
at UT San Antonio. I get it.
Well,
I get it. Undefeated in his conference. He's had a couple double-digit win seasons down there.
I don't know what 7-3 or 9-1 or 10-0. I don't know what any of those are supposed to mean to me,
Yeah, that's fair.
because he plays in that conference. Yeah, you know what
No, I get it.
and I'm not even discounting it. I just say I don't understand what we're supposed to glean from that. Like, good for him, I guess. Everyone keeps talking about, like, well, but UTSA, like, I mean, they've just been so, like, garbage or whatever. And okay, but what were they doing before Jeff Traylor got there? Like, they're a school in the middle of Texas who could decide, you know what, we want to run a real football program, and all of a sudden turn it into, you know, losing a couple of games in some garbage conference every year. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
is it really that hard to do what he's done?
Personally, I don't think so. Not at
Yeah.
UT San Antonio when you do have the connections with the high school coaches in
Right.
this state. I don't think that's a miracle. I think the guys uh, that have come out of the high school coaching ranks in the state of Texas do really well at smaller schools, at lesser known schools. They can go make an impact at even at Texas Tech in year one by getting
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of kids in there that maybe they flew under the radar from big time programs and they didn't get a bunch of D1 offers and they don't want to go off to, you know, Dartmouth. They just want to go down the road, play their football and be close to home. Like I think you can start to attract those kind of guys and you can make an impact. I think it happens all the time. But Jeff Traylor's a good recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
Some would say too good. There are some people in the know, all right, who have expressed quite a bit of concern about how the guy has gone about recruiting. Um, Flat out playing dirty, dirty pool
Mm-hmm.
in the state of
While
Texas.
while he was at the University of Texas, by the way, on
And
staff
so
there.
maybe their opinions are a
Yeah.
little jaded by
Maybe.
that. It's certainly possible.
Mm-hmm.
But the guy can flat out recruit. There's no doubt about that. The word on the street is he is not an X's and O's guy at all. Not interested in being in the details of how to actually run an offense or a defense.
That's really okay with me too.
Yeah.
I think.
If your strength is being able to hire top flight coordinators, and he is known to understand the talent for those coordinator positions, but that has not translated into hiring those positions at his other D1 stops. And so it was with Chad Morris
Right.
at SMU and at Arkansas.
Yep.
Okay. And at Arkansas was the associate head coach and basically the CEO of the program. Because remember, Chad Morris was a X's and O's
Those offensive guru.
offensive guru. So he
Right.
needed somebody to run his program.
Yeah.
And by all accounts, that thing got run into the ground. All right. With Jeff Traylor managing all of that.
Personnel.
Yep.
Yeah.
Staff. So that's the evidence that we have to go on at the Division One level. It's not a good track record. Now, it's a limited track record.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the guy learned a whole heck of a lot at UT San Antonio. Maybe he learned a lot at Texas and at
Maybe
UTSA.
Chad Morris is just that garbage.
Maybe so.
I don't know.
Yeah. We don't know. And that's sort of the point, isn't it? We don't know. We don't have enough data points on what this guy is about to turn the keys to this roster and this program and say, hey, you're good enough, we think. It just, that's where our depression
Yeah.
this week sets in. That's where we are.
Yeah.
We're at, well, maybe he's good enough.
Maybe. And from there, before we get to Schumann, there's a lot of names out there that, frankly, like Tyler in the chat's pointing out that some of them I've never heard of. Well, Braum at Louisville, I've heard of him, but
Yeah.
Kleiman I've heard of, but they're not well-known names, and so they're big swings.
Yeah.
They're big rolls of the dice. It's whatever. And then the name, I don't know. You want to go Schumann?
Sure. Because
Okay.
in the coordinator up and comer category, his name's the one that seems to get dropped the
Right.
most.
Yeah.
What do we know about him? He's incredibly young,
33.
33 years old, considered a kind of a defensive savant.
Yeah.
All right. Still underneath Kirby Smart's tutelage,
Mm-hmm.
right? So is he completely running the defense every day in practice? I don't know. I don't know what that situation is. Okay.
So his title is defensive coordinator now, right? He's not co-DC anymore, is he?
Sure. I don't know. I can Google it here. You know what? I'll Google it.
No,
It doesn't really
it
matter, but
doesn't really matter. I believe he was co-DC with Dan Lanning before Dan Lanning left for Oregon, but
okay.
I could be wrong. But and I think he's the lone DC now for Georgia.
I have listened to the guy talk about defense.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty unbelievable
Mm-hmm.
if you listen to him. The guy knows what he's doing. He his philosophy is you're doing everything. Like you're throwing everything at an offense. You're changing things up, all the time. Um, you're going to be multiple. You're going to try to disguise things. You're going to try to confuse. You're going to exploit weaknesses. I mean, all the things that guys talk about, but when he talks about it, there's a lot of depth there. And now, does anybody in college football have more talent at their disposal than this guy?
I keep hearing about how every linebacker that's played for him is in the NFL or whatever since he's been at Georgia. And I'm like, okay,
Every linebacker that's played at Georgia in the last 5 years is basically in the NFL.
right. I wonder why that is. I, it could be the genius of Glenn Schumann, or it could just be the genius of recruiting a whole bunch of 4 and 5 stars every year. I don't know.
It could be.
Could be that Roquan Smith was on the roster.
I
And
mean,
he was
let's not
like
forget
a
who the
7 star.
number 11 defense in the country is right now. It's ours. All right. And last year, DJ Durkin was a freaking idiot. Right?
Right.
And all of a sudden, some talent grew up and some more talent came in, and they're up to number 11. So, talent seems to be the biggest, the number one element in
Oh.
success
Are you? Oh,
in college football.
Oh boy.
Seems to be. I know that still seems to be controversial for some people, but it is.
all right. Is that where we're going now?
Well,
I think we have to because, I'm getting asked a lot. What do you think we should do? And nobody really wants to hear the answer
they don't want to hear the answer.
because I nobody wants to talk reasonably about what the program needs, and I guess we have to say off the top that what we want out of the program is a title,
A national
a
title.
national championship. I don't want to just stop losing 4 or 5 games a year. It's not enough. Like 10-2 is not enough. Finally winning the West is not enough.
So, what does it take to do that? What is the number one ingredient for doing that?
You've got to have one of the most talented rosters in the country.
I would say you have to have one of the
Top 2 or 3. Yeah.
top rosters in college football.
Yeah. Which apparently sends people into a fit of rage if you point that out. Because we've just, we've sat here really in the very first year of Jimbo having such a roster. It's the first year he's had such a roster here at A&M.
It is the first year.
Nobody wants to hear that either, but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And in that first year of having such a roster, we have lost 4 games and are very likely going to lose 5.
Probably 5. Maybe 6, depending on our bowl matchup.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe.
Whatever. I doubt that. Well,
5.
maybe now. If Jimbo were still the coach through the end of the year, I would say that the chances of us losing the bowl game are extremely small. But whatever. But yes, point being, you have to have one of the best, let's say 3 rosters in the entire country in order to win a national championship. Now, can you have such a roster and be such a horrible coach that it doesn't matter? Of course. Like, you have to have a good staff. You have to have good development. You have to have good X's and O's. And you have to have a lot of things fall your way. But can you do it without a top 3 roster in the country? Is it possible?
Let me answer. No, it is not. It is not possible. But TCU made the college football playoff last year.
Yeah.
Go
So
to
what?
hell.
Go to hell. See you. God, man. Yeah. And I'm, heck, I was into it with uh, Gabe Bach on Twitter today, right? Like, just like, whoa, but look at the
We just got to have somebody here who can develop players.
right.
That
That's
is
nice.
a that is a distant number 2 from number 1. Number 1, you have to have the players.
You have to have the players. I mean, yeah, God, and
So,
that's why I keep asking. Wait, so in these hires and the list you're throwing out, like even things like keeping Elijah Robinson as the head coach and bringing in, I don't even know what people have been like. Well, bring in this guy to run the offense, and you have okay. What is your plan then to recruit one of the top 3 rosters in the country? And the response is always, well, I mean, it's well, we've got to develop them anyway. We've already seen what happens with that, so I don't know. Now it just doesn't matter. Now it just doesn't matter. Or we've got NIL, which I don't know. We'll probably have to get to that. But it just why are people so stupid?
we've
No,
probably
it's
asked ourselves this like
a
5,000 times
thousand
since
times.
Sunday. Oh, not
Yeah,
just since Sunday. It's been a rough season.
it has been a rough season. Well, but every time you bring it up, the response is immediately, well, but we have that and we're losing. So,
Yeah, we told you what was going
okay,
to happen this season.
we did, didn't we?
We told everybody what was about to happen. Okay? And
And that you didn't have the stomach for it.
you weren't ready. You weren't ready. Turns out
Yeah,
you weren't.
yeah.
Do we need to recap that? Should we spend 30 seconds? Here's the deal. I'm going to do it. The second that Connor Wigman got hurt, the second we told you this is about to get really ugly and you're not ready for it. Why? Because we knew who Max Johnson was. We knew. And I think it's perfect that the lights went out at that very moment. I'm going to go take care of that.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Go back and watch the old shows. We did. And we told you that you weren't going to be able to handle it. And you didn't. And apparently a lot of big money ags didn't either. And now here we are.
Well, Ross Bjork couldn't handle it. And, he went to Ole Miss
Mm,
and he sat in the suite with all of his old buddies. And he really took it in his tweed blazer that night. And he came home and he stewed on his back porch and made a phone call to the president. And he said, something's just not right. Yeah. Yeah, something's not right. Something about 8% of your drop back pass attempts getting sacked just isn't right. And, you know, we told you so. Yeah, bring it. Let's keep this going. We got a hell of a lot more to talk about. And look, I think it's worth spending just a couple of more seconds on it because people say, well, Jimbo couldn't develop any talent. Somebody tell me how we went from a horrible defense with a bunch of freshmen to a borderline top 10 defense in 6 months. How did that happen?
DJ Durkin.
Oh, it's DJ.
Uh,
Well,
oh,
I guess we better not get rid of him.
yeah. We better not.
But
Yeah. Well, it's just the talent overcame his crappy coaching.
yeah, they just had to get bigger and stronger.
Oh,
Although the lack of strength and conditioning is why our quarterbacks got killed.
right.
I don't know. Anyway, we're probably barking up the wrong tree.
Probably.
So, Casey, let's flip back. All right, we got to have talent.
We have to have talent, and so the point being, the thing that I think about with all of these names is that, and that I keep asking people is this guy a relentless recruiter? And do the people making this hire understand that you have to have a relentless recruiter? Somebody that not just personally is grinding, but understands they need an entire organization that is relentless in recruiting, in the portal, in NIL, or whatever is required
Yep.
to assemble one of the best rosters in college football. Is that your number one priority in making this hire? Because if it is not your number one priority, not your only priority, but your number one priority, if that's not it, then we have just lit $76 million on fire. And we've wasted however many years of Aggie football. I mean, that's what it is.
Potentially in a decade.
Potentially a decade, yeah. No, that's right. I don't think people don't seem to grasp that either. Like they just don't. It's like, well, the right guy can come in here and turn it around real quick. Well, like, turn it around to what? To what?
Yeah.
The right guy can come in here real quick and win 9 games, go 10-2, come in second in the West. The right guy can do that very quickly.
But if they can't continue to recruit at an elite level, then they're just Sam Pittman.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing will crater faster than I think anybody believes it can. So, and you say, well, people do it all the time. They do not do it in the SEC West. So,
Nobody does it in the SEC West.
right now, based on the list of what's realistic, man, that's a Big 12 list right there. That's what that is. So that's why I think you and I are sitting here. We're not very excited.
Mm-mm.
So, what would make you excited, Casey? Like if you woke up tomorrow to the news that so and so is taking over A&M football, you'd be pretty damn pumped.
Oh boy, define pumped. Like,
You knew the future was bright, right? Not the next 5 years, the next 12 months. You were excited about somebody that was going to hold this roster together, maximize its potential, and put this thing on a path that's tough to screw up.
God, man, honestly, none of the names that have been talked about really are going to give me that level of excitement. I know our buddy Jake Crane is all aboard the Urban Meyer train. You know, dirtbag aside, you know, if you could somehow make that happen, I would have a high level of confidence about what next year looks like, and the ability to retain the roster as is and add to it.
It's the only name. The only name.
Well, only name only because you know you're not
It
getting
ain't
Nick
gonna be Saban.
Saban or Kirby
Right.
or Ryan Day, who doesn't really he doesn't really excite me that much, but whatever. But yeah,
Jim Harbaugh.
Jim Harbaugh. Yeah. So yeah, he's the only one that's not currently coaching that
That
would give
even
me
seems within the realm of possibilities.
right.
So, and I know a lot of people, including our most loyal listener, their stomach turns at that. I get it. Urban Meyer seems to be a very compromised individual. But if the goal is to win a national title and you need somebody to recruit at an elite level to coach and develop players, to have a staff that can do the same and do it consistently, that's it. He's the only guy.
Yeah. Where you're like, well, now we have like a 1 in 3 chance.
A 1 in 3 swing at this.
Right. That's the only one. And he's also, when we talk earlier about like, if you want to spend more than $4 or $5 million a year on your coach and having to galvanize the donor base,
Yes.
that's the only guy that does it.
Yep. And look, we've had this discussion. We've even tweeted it because at least one individual early on, even before Jimbo was fired, in the speculation, brought up Urban Meyer. And we highlighted that as the first reasonable suggestion that we had seen and got lit up for
And
that.
not because we liked it,
Correct.
but because it actually seemed like it had a chance of success, right?
Had a chance of happening and fits the criteria.
Right,
Douchebag aside.
right.
So if I woke up tomorrow and Urban Meyer was the head coach of Texas A&M football, I'd be pretty damn excited about Texas A&M football. All right? Bring on those 1 a.m. workout sessions and locker room beatdowns. Going to have to do something about the university PD, though.
Well,
That
I'm
ain't
not
gonna
sure
work.
even Urban Meyer could do that.
I think you're going to have to name him police commissioner.
Let's say you're gonna have to get, we're gonna have to bring in the Texas National Guard to declare martial law in College Station, to get PD to look the other way.
Yeah.
PD.
You know, and Jake is pretty adamant. He thinks that Urban wants to coach. And if
Yeah,
that
that
is the
surprises
case,
me.
it doesn't surprise me
Yeah.
because the guy's gone in and out of retirement a few times. In other words, stepped away from the game with national titles in his back pocket and has come back multiple times. And, you know, the last time was in the NFL. The NFL is a radically different situation. You can't pull the crap that you pull with professional football players that you can when you are the dictator of a college program. Can't do it. And so a lot of the things that, you know, made him successful, and make no mistake, the dude was a tyrant. Tyrant. You know, the way he ran those things is not going to translate well. And there have been some guys that do it and have done it well, but they do it in a different fashion.
Yeah.
Like,
The Urban Meyer fashion runs its course eventually.
yes.
That's the other thing.
Even on a college program.
Right.
It will eventually, although one could argue, it doesn't take its toll inside the program. It takes its toll outside the program because you're constantly turning over a roster in college football. Like you're getting your, you know, a new crop of guys, really, and even in this era, even more so, right? It's not a 4-year cycle. It's realistically like 2.5, right? With the way kids transfer in and out of programs. So, you know, your 4th-year guys, those are your guys that are fully bought in, you know, to what you're doing, and you know the Anais Smith types. Right?
Yeah.
Like everybody else has bailed at that point.
Right.
So, you know, yeah, that's about it. You know, and now you and I have had this conversation. Not an argument because I don't think that's fair. The only other guy that gets me excited about it is Dan Campbell, and that's a big unknown. Obviously, the guy can coach football.
Ye-
He can coach football.
Okay. Yeah, I don't watch the NFL enough outside the Cowboys, right? To understand it, right? To understand what I it's such a different animal to me. Like I don't know how to read the results. And you know, I don't know what the roster has been like. You know what I mean? Like, has Dan
Yeah.
Campbell built the roster from the time he took over at Detroit into what it is now? I know they've made, I think trading Stafford was shrewd at the time they did, and I'm sure it's paying dividends for them. He gets his guys to play hard for him. That's a good thing. Um, Other than that, I don't really know how to read what he's done there. But even beyond that, I mean, I like Dan, right? Like he's more of a throwback to our era, right? He precedes us by not that long, or me at least.
You at
I think
least.
you were there concurrently.
Yeah.
There was some overlap between you and Dan.
I was about a year or two behind him.
You know, had some great things to say about the rivalry with our friends in Austin. Some
Look,
legendary things. So I like Dan, but the NFL, there's, like we've said, the recruiting element of college
right?
football doesn't exist in the NFL, and it's so critical. Like, I have to know
Yes.
that he can do it in order to do what it's going to take to get him, because he's in the NFL and he makes a lot of money and he's got a good thing going.
He does. Now I find so here's a couple things. Here for a good 7 or 8 years now, probably even longer than that, Billy will tell anybody who's listening, Dan Campbell is a coaching star in the making. A rising star in the coaching community, big things coming from that guy. Now, really good friends.
Yes, they are.
Really good friends. Okay. But Billy doesn't put things out there like that are going to come back to bite him. He's always believed that. And thus far, at every level and every opportunity, Dan has seized it. Okay? Whether it's interim head coach now in Detroit, assistant, whatever, guy's been really successful as he's moved up. Has it been on the NFL side? Yes, it has. He played for quite a while. Um, a lot of good connections, and he made his bed in the NFL. Um, you know, we have seen guys be really successful in college, go be really successful in the NFL, come back home and be successful. It has happened, believe it or not. We've seen guys go bomb in the NFL, come back to college, and absolutely rock it. Some guy named Nick Saban did it. Right? So,
Pete Carroll.
Pete Carroll, um, you know, Harbaugh kicked ass in San Francisco till he kind of didn't. And now Jim Harbaugh came back to Michigan and nearly got run out of Michigan back-to-back seasons.
Yeah, you've brought that up. Michigan was exactly where we were with Jimbo a few
Exactly.
weeks ago. They were in the exact same position. They chose not to do what we just did, and you could say it's paying off for them. I guess.
It
It apparently, but
Have they made the college football playoff 2 years in a row?
yes,
2 years in a row, and they're on the
yeah,
doorstep of a third.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, were they contenders last year? No.
No, they actually shouldn't have been there,
Right.
um, in retrospect, but whatever.
Right.
They were in the exact same position, and they stuck it out. So,
Yeah. Well, so anyway, I don't know about Dan Campbell. Something that keeps coming up about Dan, though, there's people want to dismiss it immediately because they're like, he's in the NFL. Why would he go to college?
And I do not understand that.
Not one bit. I think that's so funny. And the one of the biggest reasons they say is because they say, why would we want to deal with recruiting? And let me ask you this, Brian. What's the quality of life of an NFL coach
It's
versus a
shit.
college coach?
It's shit. Like, and I do not understand this argument. And I've seen
Yeah.
some really smart people say this week. These guys they're workaholics in the NFL.
Got
They
cots in their office
it's year round.
year round.
It is an absolute grind.
Yeah.
And the life of a college head coach nowadays
Yeah.
is different than it was even 2 to 3 years ago. You actually have heard Jimbo talk about this, and it is a legitimate argument. The life of a college football head coach now is much more CEO like. The rules have changed around recruiting, okay, and how you contact athletes and when you can contact athletes. Head coaches are not on the road recruiting nearly as much as they were. The rules limit it.
Yeah.
And the way that you're allowed to communicate with recruits means that the recruiting machine that you build behind the scenes is just as important as what the head coach is actually doing.
Yep.
And so the lifestyle of a college coach, well, I'm not saying it's any less demanding. I don't think that's the right way of putting it, but the demand on what the coach is doing is different. And I
Yeah.
do think for guys who are running top flight programs and all of the things that come along with that, compensation, being the guy in a college town, like the lifestyle that you can lead, I think is better than what you can get in the NFL. I just think it has to be.
I agree. It sounds better to me.
Yeah.
Because even when we say, "Oh, I've got to have a guy that's a relentless recruiter," that's not the same as the level of relentlessness that is required of an NFL coach.
Yeah.
And even when you brought up being on the road, one, yes, it's less. So there is the road element for a college coach, even though it's less today, that doesn't exist for an NFL coach, right? Like
Right.
they live at the office in their complex, in their compound, and then they get on a plane to go over. They're going that week. If they're on the road. That's not any different for a college coach, except as far as road travel. But you know what I mean, right? Like, so okay, if you hate having to get on a plane outside of your road travel schedule to go recruit guys, I would take that trade off versus in the middle of July being at the compound at 12 o'clock at night, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Staying up and watching film with your quarterback sitting next to you for
Right.
6 or 7 hours. College is very different.
Yeah.
It's all regulated now. The time you spend with your
Yeah.
players and your practice and all of that is so tightly controlled and limited that the games, it's just different.
Yeah. That said, that
Bottle,
oh, here you go.
it's well
Yeah.
past
Sorry,
time
I
for a
have to.
refill.
There you go, buddy.
Don't put that so close to the fire.
I have to drive home, so you go to town.
God dang it.
Looks great. You did great. Don't worry about it.
That's bad.
Bottoms up.
I gotta go to
So,
work tomorrow.
Okay, that said, everything you've just talked about as an advantage in terms of lifestyle is also a source of frustration for some of these guys. Remember, they haven't been in college in 20, 30 years, right? Like they've been living that lifestyle as a player, maybe since they were 22. Now
Fair
he's
enough.
a 40-year-old. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so not being able to go in with your quarterback whenever you want and say, hey, look, we have to figure this out on film or whatever because the NCAA says you can't, that might piss you off.
The only thing that, because I did hear Billy mention this week, and I think this is absolutely true. The biggest, if the Lions were headed to a 4-12 season, I don't even freaking how many games they play now. Whatever,
17.
a 4-win season. Okay. yeah, he may. And A&M was, let's say A&M was in the top 2 or 3 jobs he were on his short list, bucket list of things he wants to do. It's his alma mater. He bleeds maroon, and by all accounts, Dan Campbell bleeds maroon.
For sure.
Okay, I think he would do it. But Billy mentioned that Dan is an extremely loyal person,
Right.
and I absolutely believe that.
Yeah.
And the Lions took a chance on him. The Lions have, stuck with him, and it, you know, really probably a stretch. So I guess it's just urban or bust for these guys. It's a list of one that if we wake up tomorrow, we're happy. Uh, a Dan Lanning, if they were somehow able to pull it off, yeah, I guess I would be pretty happy with that compared to all the other options. Um, yeah,
Yeah, kind of.
but Dan Lanning is not a perfect football coach.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. And that's what's really annoyed me for months now, really, when people talk about this, because they talk about Dan Lanning as if he's just like, that's it. That's the shortcut.
Yeah.
Like it's, and when I'm joking about people's class years and stuff in the comments, like, the point is that we've been watching college football a long time, and we've seen a lot of Dan Lannings, and we've seen them flame out, and that's not a knock on Dan, or even, I'm not claiming special knowledge about him. I'm just saying, like, the college football landscape's littered with guys like him that are now sitting around collecting buyout checks and sitting on their ranch, right? I mean, I would say Tom Herman was Dan Lanning previously. I would say, hell, even Billy Napier in Florida wasn't that long ago. People were talking about him just like they're talking about Dan Lanning. If you are saying, I really want someone from the Nick Saban coaching tree for every Kirby Smart, I got Jim McElwain, I got Jeremy Pruitt, I got Will Muschamp. Like, how much? Like,
Yeah.
so, and there's no guarantee that Dan Lanning's not the next one of those guys, rather than the next Kirby Smart. So,
Look, I like Lanning. I like him. I like listening to him talk. I
mm-hmm.
like the way that he's got a less douchey element of Lane Kiffin in him, and
Yeah,
that he's willing to sort of throw a stone or two. Um, he seems to motivate the hell out of his players. The one thing I don't like about Dan Lanning is he has straight up coached his football team out of wins
yep,
multiple times in the last 2 years. Double digit lead kind of lo- snatching defeat from the arms of victory. And that is really troubling,
mm-hmm.
because if he doesn't fix that,
Mm-hmm.
if that is in his DNA, to be the gambler when it makes no sense and to do things that just don't make any sense, man,
Mm-hmm.
all of those other things are going to
Yeah,
get screwed up in the
right.
process.
Of course, he's what, like 38?
He is.
So,
Maybe he learns from it.
right.
You would hope so.
Well, and that is part of the allure of Dan Lanning, is that he is only 38, and that you think he's adaptable, whereas you're convinced that Jimbo Fisher's stuck
Was
in the
not
mud and is
adaptable.
not adaptable, right? But yeah, I mean, when people talk about Dan Lanning, that's really all I think about is, okay, like, he's just not he's not the sure thing that you think he is. And I wouldn't even be upset if we hired him. I would be
Yeah.
moderately excited, I guess, given the situation we're in. But yeah,
So there is a name that you and I exchanged some text on, that isn't really showing up on a lot of lists, and I don't even know how to feel about him. But the question that I asked you earlier this week, I said, is Cliff Kingsbury a less douchey version of Lane Kiffin?
I mean, maybe. Yeah, I wasn't. I don't. I don't know how to answer that just because I'm not entirely sure how I feel about Lane Kiffin, aside from his douchiness, right?
I completely
Aside from the
fair.
fact that he's got one of the most punchable faces in college football, and he's an asshole, and I just don't like him. Like, I don't really know what to think about him as a program runner, because you know, as he loves to tell you all the time, he's at a school right now that just probably can't do it. Like, probably just doesn't have the resources to to compete in college football, right? And he loves to point that out. And for some reason, Ole Miss fans, they're like, well, that's Lane being Lane. But
That
and
is
they're
one of
right.
that is one of the weirdest
It's a weird,
situations
yeah,
and one of the weirdest dudes.
yeah,
And the reason I ask that is in my because in my mind, if Cliff Kingsbury was at Ole Miss, they're probably the same program. I think they are, and I know I'm projecting. I am,
yeah.
but I guess the only difference is there's something about Lane being such a douche that is the perfect fit at a place like Ole Miss, to where somehow that team plays with
They play
that
with an edge.
douchey edge chip on their shoulder
Yeah.
that gets them to elevate slightly above
What
their talent level in certain
in certain
situations,
situations,
right?
very specific
Very
situations.
specific
Yeah.
situations. And I
Um,
don't know. That's not Cliff Kingsbury. That's
no,
not who he is.
the other thing about Lane is that we talk about playing the style of offense that Lane plays, or that Aggies seem to want us to play all the time. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. It has consequences with the rest of your football team on the other side of the football.
Yeah.
I think Lane understands that, and now he can't, and he plays the way he does because he can't get the kind of talent he wants
Right.
on defense, and knows that this is his best chance to maximize the talent across the whole football team that he can get. I think if he had the talent that Alabama had, I think you would see a little bit different approach offensively.
Well, we saw
Still
that at
at
Alabama.
Alabama, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know if I would say the same for Cliff Kingsbury.
Yeah. I think Cliff does understand it, but I don't know that he's sort of capable of pulling that same level of performance out of the overall team at certain times, right? Like, I think what we mean by that is Lane knows he's going to be the riverboat gambler on offense. He's going to coach his offense to be really aggressive, although they play to their strengths. Whatever their strength is, they
Yeah.
do play to it. So he is very adaptable. He's not
Yeah.
always air raiding you,
Right.
as we well know. But he expects his defense to complement what they're doing, and if they aren't very talented, they're going to be as aggressive as hell. They're going to try to create chaos. They're going to try to make up for the fact that, yeah, you could line up and grind them to a pulp, right? So his offense is going to come right at you, and the defense is not going to sit back and wait for you to try to grind them to a pulp, right? Like, so there is that kind of, complementary chaos that you get with him. I'm not even remotely interested in what that dude brings to the table for a variety of reasons, and it ain't happening.
It's not.
It is not happening.
You know,
Even if money, even if you could, even if that guy was willing to go, I'll leave Old Miss for $6 million a year. It ain't happening.
yeah. What's funny, I got some side eye at the office today too, just as this came up because you and I talked about, does Lane even want this job this week? And
Well, he
Like,
doesn't want the one he
he
has.
doesn't want the one he has. He's made that very clear. It's although I'm not
Since the
so
day
sure
he got
since
there.
the day he got there, I'm not so sure it's clear to the people of Ole Miss actually, but it should be clear to everybody else. He doesn't want that job. I think he very much wants this job. And I think in his mind, he has campaigned for this job ever since he got to Ole Miss. And I think he's going to be surprised and angry that nobody calls about this job. And not just because we can't afford it.
Right.
Which is going to be an interesting element when somebody else does get the job. You know, if Lane can hang 80 on us next year, he's going to do so. Well, actually, do we play Ole Miss next year? I don't even
That's
know.
a good question. I don't even know who we play next
Who
year.
cares?
Ah,
I wish I could finish off that bottle right now.
and
Whatever.
oh, there is a designated driver in the house who said she would take you home.
God, I would be the worst.
It would be the
It would be
worst.
the worst. It would just be such an a-hole move for me to take somebody up on. Doesn't mean I
Uh,
haven't done it before.
she's a disgruntled teen,
That's
so
true. It's
you
yeah.
know she did offer. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Well,
She knows what she's getting into.
Jesus, it is 11 o'clock at night.
We've been rolling, man.
We have been
We
rolling,
knew
and
this
we're
was gonna.
not.
This is
Yeah,
this.
that's
We knew
fine.
this
This
was
is
gonna happen.
therapy.
I, it is therapy. It's been a rough couple of days. I've had to take in the shorts from everybody at work, everywhere I go. Well,
Oh, not
what?
me.
Oh,
I
well, it's
go on
been.
the offensive.
I have gone on the offense because anytime anybody walks by my desk and goes, "You're really going to pay him $77 million to not coach?" And I always, this is what I say. Not only that, there is no plan. And every single person that I have said that to is like, "What?" I go, "There's no plan. There's no hire ready to go. There's no short list. There's no plan whatsoever. We lit $77 million." And they go, "Okay, I thought for sure you had like a guy lined up. Like that's why you did this."
You would think that.
No.
No.
To quote Johnny Manziel, zero.
Oh boy,
And that
we have not
actually,
made use of
believe
that.
it or that's the best offense in that conversation because they're like, "I can't believe that. I can't. That doesn't make any sense." And I'm like, "You're right. It doesn't make any sense. Because if I tried to do something like that in my job, I wouldn't have a job."
Mm, that's interesting. I take a different tack just because most of the people that approach me want to gloat
Oh.
over. It's more of an "I told you so,"
Mm.
and so as soon as they just go, "So I heard, like, so what do you think?" And it's just, and I say, "I think it's going to go down as the dumbest thing we've ever done."
You have said that.
I have said that on this podcast. You can go find it. So if we let this guy go, it'll be the dumbest thing we ever do, and we will deserve whatever happens next. And
And
I
and
say
and
that, and people immediately are just like, "That's it." They don't.
and I want people to understand this. All 11 that are watching. Really about 8.
We hit we hit double
I
digits.
know. We take no pleasure in that
Absolutely none.
because we love Aggie football.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. It takes a disproportionate amount of my emotional energy, and we wanted it to work out with Jimbo Fisher for sure. Um, just like we wanted it to work out with everybody before that.
Right.
Never in any of these coaching dismissals have we ever felt like we do today.
Never.
Always felt hopeful about what comes next. I should caveat that uh, I feel similarly today that I did the day we fired R.C. Slocum
Oh,
for a very
yeah.
different reason. For a
Mm.
very different reason, because I felt like we dealt RC a pretty bad hand at the time. We did not step up and do the things
Yeah.
necessary that other schools were doing. And we expected him to just keep on doing what he had done. And that was really apparent, and I felt bad for the dude because he was an institution. It's very different than what I feel today,
Hmm.
because we have put it all on the line. We and But now what we're saying is we're not going to put it all on the line.
Hmm.
That and just like the day Connor Wigman got hurt, nobody changed their expectations. We didn't adjust to what was coming. And that's what I feel like today. We are not going to go forward and behave and act like an institution whose goal is to win a national title, and collectively we have not changed our expectations. And therefore it's just darkness. That's what I
Hmm.
feel. I just feel darkness.
Right.
So
Yeah. And to your point, we're not hoping for it.
I hope I'm wrong.
We hope so hard that we're wrong, but that's the feeling.
I hope they go hire the next Urban Meyer before he's Urban Meyer,
Right.
or she.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. To
But
your point, I mean, hell, I went down the Saban coaching tree, a few minutes ago. I mean, Kevin Sumlin was talked about the way Dan Lanning's been talked about. So, you know, I I don't know. Now, do you want to say? So, of the realistic names that are out there, not Dan Lanning, not Urban Meyer, right? Um, so, is there a name that is the most interesting that you feel like gives us the best chance of a title?
of names that have been mentioned,
Yeah, Trailer, Elko, Schumann, Leapold. I don't even. I mean, whatever. Any of them.
no. And I know you said which of the ones. No, none of them.
Mm.
I think you hire any of those guys, my feeling is in about 3 years we're doing this again at minimum. We're doing it in 3 years. We might give them 4. I just don't see it. So we're hiring a mistake. Maybe we're paying off some debt, reloading and going again. That's where I think we are. Just don't. There's not a name that's come up. There's some other names that I think should be on that list. I think ahead of most of these guys that I keep hearing about. But again, you know, uh, Mike Gundy is a guy I would rather have than any of those 4 that you mentioned.
Hmm. Mm.
And I don't love that idea, but I'd rather that because I kind of know, I know what Mike is and I know what he's capable of with a top 25 roster. And I've always been intrigued on, well, what does that guy do with a top 15, top 10 roster? But then you go, well, why couldn't he recruit that? And I'm going,
Mm.
Oklahoma State's not in the same position that Texas A&M is in.
They aren't, but I'm skeptical.
I
Yeah.
understand your skepticism. I think I think Mike Gundy has done better than anybody's ever done at Oklahoma State.
Yeah. But I would just say Gundy's also one of those names where if you hire him and you're like, well, we think maybe he can do it, there's no holding on to this roster and giving him a head start. Like, he's not going to hold it together. I
And
don't
I don't
think,
think
I don't,
any of those guys hold it together. And that's kind of my point. I don't think any of them.
yeah.
I don't think Schulman holds it together. I don't think Traylor holds it together. I think I think a lot of those guys in that roster probably have a pretty awful opinion of somebody like a Jeff Traylor. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Mike, does Mike Elko hold it
I
together?
don't think so. Not on
I,
the offensive side. Not at
no,
all. Not at all.
no. If I'm
No.
Connor Wigman,
Connor Wegman's gone. Evan Stewart, Noah Thomas. Like, they're all gone.
Reuben Foster,
Yeah. Reuben Foster, probably an offensive lineman or two. Like,
they're gone.
Elko, that side of the ball is gone. Um, I think Dan Lanning, and we think
Yes,
he's not realistic. I think he holds it together on both sides of the ball.
I do. I think he
Um,
does hold it together. I
yeah.
100%. That's the buzz. That's the guy everybody
Hmm.
goes, whoa, I didn't think that was going to happen.
Yeah.
He could do it. But again, all signs point to no.
Hmm.
Like, not even, well, probably not. They point to no. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I don't know what else to say, man. We've gone long enough. There's not anything else to say about it until I
until a hire
guess
is made.
I guess we find out who it is. So, everybody, you stuck with us long enough. We appreciate you listening in. Um, beat the hell out of Abilene Christian. And with that, the Meltdown show is signing off. Salud.
You finish this.